Welcome to Mixed Metaphors, and welcome to Freya's Book Friday. So this will actually have been recorded the day that I release it. So I'm recording this at work before I leave, and I'm starting it before I leave, and this is going to be an episode about reading hacks. So it's partly due to my plan from the video 2 reading spurs. That was a week or two ago. I was planning to, let's just say I floated the idea of reading Homeland and The Last Wish prior to the end of 2023, and none were less surprised than I was that not only did I not read both of them, at least yet, and it is still the 29th, but not only did I not read either of them, or not only did I not read both of them, but I didn't finish either of them, or at least I haven't finished them yet. However, I did read a little bit of The Last Wish yesterday at work, and, it was going pretty well. It was the short story where Geralt the Witcher, the titular character of the series, is sort of investigating some kind of vampire thing, and he meets up with this like werebear kind of creature, like a man with the head of a bear, and I haven't finished it quite yet, but I got through more than 10 pages of it last night, and not too much so with difficulty either. So, not a bad reading night for me. Now, if we're comparing it to the reading of Atlas Shrugged in 1 week, that wouldn't be nearly a sufficient reading day, certainly, like all of Monday or all of Tuesday or whatever. But it's not that great of a reading night either for that, because I'm looking to be on 200 pages a day for that. A little less than 200 pages a day. But am I confident that I'll finish Atlas Shrugged in that week? I'm not sure, but if I do, then I think it's going to set me on a real path of growth or of sturdiness in my scheduling. Now, in the interest of actually following the schedule, there are some reading hacks that I think can really be helpful for people. So, reading hack number 1. Play role-playing games. Now, I'm not really talking about the Elder Scrolls. Maybe I'm not even really talking about any role-playing games where they have voice acting, although I imagine that this could work with that, and it could work with the Elder Scrolls as well, because there is a lot of reading to do in the Elder Scrolls, if you sort of seek it out. But depending on which game of that series it is, or which game it is in general, the voice acting may pretty much take away all of the reading and turn what would be comparable to a book into something more comparable to an audiobook. And whereas other people say, they use the word reading to refer to listening to an audiobook, it's like, no, you're listening, you're not reading. Reading is looking at words on a piece of paper or looking at letters and reading the words that are, there. As I've said, you know how I know it's not reading to listen to an audiobook? Because you don't have to know how to read to listen to an audiobook. So, if you don't know how to do it, that might suggest that you're not actually doing it. Now, here's the thing, though. I've been playing Final Fantasy IX, and I've gotten maybe farther or further in the game than I've ever gotten before. And one thing that there is a lot to do of in Final Fantasy IX is reading. As with a lot of other RPGs, or at least RPGs without voice acting, there's a decent amount of reading to do. In fact, really, most of the game, or most of the gameplay, has to do with reading. I mean, there are little mini games where it's a little more action-oriented, and of course you walk around the map with your character, or you walk around the areas with your character, whatever, but much of the game, whether it's going through menus to equip different items for your character, or going through menus in battle screens, unless it's like an action RPG of some sort, you know, a turn-based RPG that doesn't have voice acting tends to have a lot of reading, both for the sort of more gameplay parts of it and for the parts where you're getting, dialogue or just generally text to tell you different things in the game. And I've got to say, that is an excellent way. It might sound like you're sort of bullshit, like, oh, like sort of shoehorning some kind of like positive aspect of something into something that's not really there. Like, oh, I'm getting better at math because I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, and when you run somebody over on the sidewalk, sometimes they drop amounts of money, and then you can get the amount of money and you can see how much your total rises to. It's like, really, you're doing the math there, or are you just not even looking at the screen when the number goes up? But I think it's somewhat legitimate, if not very legitimate, to talk about RPGs in the style that I've laid out as good sort of hacks for increasing your reading capacity and speed, and just, your likelihood to read more and your likelihood to enjoy what you're reading. If you're playing a decent amount of Final Fantasy IX, unless you're just skipping past a lot of the dialogue, you're probably reading a lot. Same probably goes for Final Fantasy 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe a little less with Final Fantasy like 1 or the early ones, because they don't have quite, as far as I've heard anyway, they don't have that much story to them. Not really, but, even with those, or with a game like Pokemon, it's a decent amount of reading text. And as opposed to like reading the comments under a YouTube video, maybe, or like the titles of YouTube videos, or reading things on social media platforms in general, as opposed to those kinds of things, this is an amount of reading and sort of a studiousness of reading and an exclusivity of reading, or an explicitity of reading. Explicitity or explicitity? Explicitity. Well, this is turning into an Angry Video Game Nerd episode, isn't it? It's an explicitity of reading. And so I think reading hack number 1, play RPGs with a lot of text. You could say play video games with a lot of text. I suppose point-and-click games, or maybe adventure games of some sort, like sort of more point-and-click based adventure games of some sort, might be good, but just be honest with yourself about how much text is in a given game, and then play that game. And I think you may find that if you sort of couple that with looking to read more books or short stories, or, just read more in a way that you might, or like with something that you're reading that you might consider like quote-unquote actual reading, it's going to really help you, I think, get more into the rhythm of reading a lot to play these games. So I think that's a huge hack, and I think for all of the sort of bullshitty kind of like excuses people give themselves to do certain things by saying that there's some kind of like benefit to it, I think this is a place where it's an actual benefit, and I think it's interesting that at least I haven't heard much of this benefit being discussed or talked about in general. And I've watched a lot of video game videos on YouTube. I've read a decent amount of stuff in video game magazines, not recently, of course. I've read a decent amount of stuff on video game websites, or at least an okay amount of stuff over the years. I've read Penny Arcade, which it's comic strips, but still, I've done my time in the video game culture to some extent, enough to sort of get the impression that people aren't giving this very, very powerful reading hack nearly as much credence as they could be. And it may be stuff they're already doing. And I think also people used to spend more time playing video games, especially RPGs, that were more text-based, like Final Fantasy IX. And I think if you really devote yourself to doing that, like you say, like, I'm gonna get Final Fantasy IX on my PlayStation 4 and I'm gonna beat it, you're gonna get a lot of good reading practice in. Now, what's hack number 2? So hack number 2 is finding out whether you're enjoying what you're reading. So this is while you're reading, and it may be while you're reading whatever you're reading, but if you find that you're actually enjoying it and sort of getting engaged with it and sort of, being immersed in whatever you're reading, I think that's a really good sign that not only, as I wrote in a blog post, not only are you doing, or something like this, not only are you actually indeed doing the activity of reading, because, you can read words on a page and not feel like you've actually really read anything, but not only are you actually doing the reading itself, but you're probably on track to complete whatever you're reading the more you enjoy it. So I'd sort of just kind of keep a meter on, kind of keep track of how much you're enjoying what you're reading, and perhaps in thinking about it, you'll get more into the likelihood of enjoying what you're reading, and to whatever extent you're actually enjoying the process, you're probably A, doing it well, and B, doing it in a fashion that might lead you to actually finish books. So that one may sound like sort of a thought trick, or it may sound like, well, you kind of have to be doing the reading in a sufficient way to begin with to do it. But I think if you approach whatever you're reading with the idea of saying, hey, am I actually enjoying this? And then sort of paying attention to your enjoyment of it when you do, I think you might find that you're enjoying it more often and that you're actually reading more when you do. So, like, for example, last night when I was reading some of The Last Wish at work, I found myself, like, looking back at the page number and realizing, hey, like, more pages have gone by than I've really noticed going by. In the sense of, like, time flies when you're having fun, not in the sense of, like, I've been kind of looking at this page with my eyes glazed over, and I didn't realize that the pages were going by because I just haven't really been engaging with the content to begin with. Hack number 3, reading music. Now, I attribute, if not attribute, then I give some credit, at least for this, to Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. I don't know if it was, I'm not exactly sure what the video was called. It might have been something similar to this, but Mike from Mike's Book Reviews talked about how he gets the reading done that he does. And one of the things he mentioned, or at least he did mention this, it was listening to music while he read. And he talked about the types of music that he'd listen to. I think he said, like, video game soundtracks or, like, movie soundtracks. Or not soundtracks, like scores. So, like, I think he mentioned the Lord of the Rings one. He might have mentioned the score for Skyrim or, like, Elder Scrolls in general. But this was something I did last night as well. I actually looked up on YouTube classical music for reading. And for part of the reading time, I did that. For part of the reading time, I did like one of those meditation music videos where it was like regenerate your body, heal your whatever. And a good stuff to look for in that realm would be stuff with HZ associated with it, like different amounts of hertz. Those are audio tracks where they're set to a certain frequency, or at least they're supposed to be, where it's actually a better frequency or a more in alignment frequency with sort of like the universe or your spiritual essence, or just a more comfortable frequency for you spiritually or energetically or something, as opposed to the frequency that many or most things are recorded in, which is apparently like 440 or something, and it's apparently something that is actually abrasive spiritually or energetically or frequency-wise. So what am I saying here? I'm saying look for meditation music that tells you what amount of hertz it is, HZ, on YouTube or other places, or like classical music that's good, or maybe like more instrumental music in general. Music with lyrics, I think that works in some respect, because you might end up turning it off sooner because you find that it gets in your way. And if you find yourself turning the music off, then that's actually a good sign, because you find that you're focused enough and sort of integrated enough into and focused enough on the task of reading that you're then cutting out a distraction, and thus it seems like you've actually gotten into the process of reading and you're doing it sufficiently. So music with lyrics could be good in that sense, because you're more likely to turn it off, and when you turn it off, that's a good indication that you're actually invested in the reading itself. But music without lyrics can be good, because it's sort of blocking out the ambient noises around you, and it is in itself non-obtrusive, so it's sort of more like white noise. And if you have a certain kind of white noise that you like to listen to, then that's probably good to do as well. That's probably a good option for this also. Now, another one, this would be hack number 4, would be doing releasing on reading. So you might want to look into the Sedona method a little first. I'd recommend looking into it anyway. But the Sedona method in particular, or something similar, would be related to sort of getting in touch with your feelings about a given subject, in this case, reading. Now, I find when I read, I often sort of get caught emotionally or spiritually rather than, something else, where it feels like I'm sort of trying to stay on the right track spiritually or emotionally, trying to keep my center. And I find that when I'm reading, it seems to be sort of trying to knock me off center, or it feels like I'm sort of wavering when I read. Now, I think this might be sort of an illusion, because I think it might actually be that, essentially whatever sort of baggage you're carrying around is coming up while you're reading, and it's just more avoidance of it to kind of struggle with it and suffer with it while you're reading. And so this is probably the majority of what's slowing down or stopping my reading progress. And it might be helpful to, just in the sense of the Sedona method, ask yourself, like, what am I feeling about reading right now? And, do some kind of like emotional releasing work, or Sedona method in particular type of thing with that.